Whether it's your DNA, I've no idea, but the great songwriters, and I'm not blowing smoke here, but people that have written great songs for a considerable length of time, I think have a different DNA than those that can write a song or two. When you look at what you've wrote in the past, you're still writing now. I mean, I thought Pretty Boy was a cracking single, very psychedelic. It resonated with me on a load of different levels. How do you keep that quality control so that you don't write something, it's bobbins, but nobody will tell you and it gets released?
It's an instinctive thing. I just think you've got to want to push yourself and just not be dialing it in. You've got to want to be the guy. I'm still in love. I'm still in love with writing. I'm still in love with the creative process or processes, whatever they may be. And the whole thing never gets old for me. It never gets old. I'm as much fascinated by it today as I was 13 years ago when I went solo, and 30 years ago next year when Definitely Maybe came out. I'm fascinated by it. And I love the feeling of creating something out of nothing and the journey that song will take from where you write the songs all the way through to the studio, then to playing it to people, then it being released and then hearing it on the radio. I love that journey. It's vital, and it's what kind of keeps you going.
There's strings on some of the stuff. What was the thinking behind that? Why was that a step you felt you had to take?
I'm taking a lead from Primal Scream here. I felt that the great bands that evolve, every album is a reaction to the album that came before it. And the last album, Who Built the Moon, was improvised in the studio, and it was very electronic, and it was something that I'd never done before. And this one, I wanted to be a reaction from that and go back to basics. And, Who Built the Moon was not written on an acoustic guitar, but this one was. And I guess I wrote it in that first heavy lockdown period in 2020, where, we were isolated for 9 months. And I guess the songs are a bit reflective, and there's nothing quite like a string section or orchestra that can squeeze the emotion out of a song. So,
how important is it that you have, well, certainly with Jem and Chris, lads that you've been with now for over 10 years, well over 10 years. How important is it that you've got that sort of musical comrades hanging about?
Well, look, I mean, I write in isolation anyway. I don't take any outside influences on the writing, but the guys that I played with now, Russ and Chris and Mike and Gem for over 20 odd years, and the other lads since I went solo, they can reaffirm what you think. So, for instance, I thought Pretty Boy was amazing when I first wrote it. And then when they heard it, they thought it was amazing. And then it just kind of reaffirms your own feeling of it. But they're my mates, you know what I mean? They're my musical comrades, and we make quite the noise. And yeah, it's a privilege to play with them, actually. They're brilliant.
So 2 songs I want to get to now. Of all the stuff, I was borrowing The Desert Island from the BBC, and I could plop you on it for a bit. But you could take one Oasis track only. Of all those babies, of all those songs you wrote, which one would it be?
Supersonic.
Go on, tell us why.
Well, it was written in the studio on the hoof one night, mixed it there and then that night. It was written, recorded and mixed in about 6 hours, and it's just a moment of pure inspiration. It's the original lineup, jamming it out in the studio. Magic.
And of all your high-flying bird stuff, up to date, one track only.
Riverman.
Why that song?
Why Riverman?
Yeah,
because it's still, when I hear it now and again, I'll play it, or it'll come on my shuffle or something. It still blows me away. I think the sound of it is incredible, and it's another song that came out of nothing one afternoon.
So I'm going to tell you a quick story. 60 years ago, I went to Salford Lads Club. Past Salford Lads Club, onto Trafford Road, the donkey jacket on, black T-shirt, tight jeans, thought I looked the business, greasy hair, comb back, with my collar up on my donkey jacket, went to a club and heard Please Please Me by the Beatles. It changed my life, Noel. That's why I'm having this conversation with you now. That's why I was in a rock and roll band. 60 years, and that's the start of Beatlemania, really. What's your thoughts on that band now, 60 years on?
I'm still getting into them. I'm still in love with them. People do say, why were they the best? It's like, because they had the best words, the best parts, they played the best parts, they wore the best clothes, they had the best sense of humour. They were the best. They're the one band from that era. I mean, there's a few, but those songs have never been bad. Hey Jude and those albums are, their day in the life. It'll never be bad. It'll never be beaten.
What was it like for you? Well, I say opening in the very best way you could for McCartney at Glastonbury. What was that like?
Well, I've played with Mac a few times, and he's a lovely, lovely, lovely guy. He's the biggest Beatles fan in the world. He is an astonishing musician. He's got great stories. He's got a brilliant sense of humour. And when you're hanging out with him, you can get on a level with him, right? Because he's just a scouser in a band, right? And you're a Manc and you're in a band, right? It's only about 3 weeks later when you think, God, that's one of the Beatles. That's one of the Beatles. So he's a dude. And I've shared the stage with him a few times and I love him dearly.
I interviewed him in London a few years ago, and a posh girl showed me into the interview and stressed that I had to be finished in 20 minutes. And when we finished, because he asked me where I came from, I said, I come from Salford, mate. He said, oh, just down the East Lancs Road from us. And at the end of it, when the posh girl came in to get rid of me, he said, go and get us some coffee. And we sat there then for about an hour and a half talking about Mersey beat and rock and roll.
Get out.
And it was an amazing moment in my life. There must be, and you've hung out and you actually played songs with him. There's got to be a standout moment from you with a hero of yours where you look back at the conversation or what happened and think, wow.
Well, I was on tour with U2 in 2018 and we were doing a gig in Sao Paulo. And as the gods of rock and roll would decree, Paul McCartney was playing in Sao Paulo, right, at the same time. And we were all staying at the same hotel. And we end up in the bar and sat talking to McCartney and Bono and The Edge. We're all hanging out. And McCartney just says, out of nowhere, he said, oh, I had a dream about John last night. And we were like, what? And he said, I had a dream about John. And we were like, and he said, yeah, we were just in the studio grooving. And we were like, and he said, yeah, it was great. And I remember thinking, wow, what a brilliant tale to tell your grandkids that, McCartney's just kind of saying, oh, I had a dream about John last night. And it's just far out, man.